Alright, so let's take a look at every Englishman that has played in the Premier League and then has subsequently signed for an MLS club since David Beckham's arrival in 2008 and just see how they fared over there. David Beckham. When it came out that David Beckham would be leaving Real Madrid at the end of the 06-07 season, everyone was jumping over themselves to see what European powerhouse this media mogul will be signing for next. When the former England captain announced he'd be jetting off to America to play in the same team as Eddie Lewis and Chris Birchall, people could be forgiven for thinking he'd been kidnapped by the US government. At 32 years of age, surely he'd want to stay and fight for his England place, no? His 5-year spell in the MLS was a success. Yes, he won a couple of cups and a few playoffs on the pitch, but off it, Christ, he revolutionised the sport. Brand Beckham is the reason that the league is now the retirement home for Champions League winners, as opposed to just a stomping ground for Danny Dichio, and God help us all is that night. John Bostock. Remember when John Bostock was supposed to be the next big thing in English football? He was making his debut for Crystal Palace at the age of 15 when he should have been down the park sculling a tin of Foster's. His arrival at Tottenham the following year caused a messy tribunal and even prompted Palace chairman Simon Jordan to tear up the season tickets he and his dad had already ordered. Didn't realise Jordan had the temperament of a 4-year-old child. Anyway, Bostock's career very quickly slid off a map. He ended up on loan at Toronto for 7 games in 2013, where he did absolutely nothing. His next club was in the Belgian 2nd Division. Ashley Cole. At his peak, Ashley Cole was the best left back on the planet and won pretty much everything there is to win in club football, so why not wind down the last couple of years of his career in LA, where he still gets to play alongside some top class talent. He's recently been named captain of LA Galaxy, although the club just missed out on the playoffs for the first time in a decade. Jermaine Defoe. See, Jermaine, this is when you should have gone to the MLS. As a 36-year-old who can't cut it in the Premier League anymore. Not 5 years ago, 6 months before the goddamn World Cup. I don't know who his agent was, but he should have fired him on the spot for that one. Yes, Defoe was far too good for the MLS, firing home 12 goals in 21 games and stuffed plenty of cash into his pockets. But Jermaine, you might as well have scored those goals down the local park for all that matter to Roy Hodgson. Hogan at prime. Hogan at prime was a failed winger at West Ham and didn't really get much of a Premier League chance with QPR, but he's going in here anyway. Snapped up on loan by Toronto in 2013. He lasted 13 anonymous games before returning to sender. He most recently played semi-professionally alongside a bunch of hungover builders and postmen for Whitehawk FC. Steven Gerrard. LA Galaxy probably couldn't believe their luck when they managed to entice Steven Gerrard away from Anfield in 2015. The poor fella was in a bad place though. He was still moping around after that slip which had cost the club everything, and the following season he'd been shoved on the bench at the Bernabeu, being sent off after 13 seconds in the derby, lost his last game at Anfield before getting smashed 6-1 by Stoke in his last ever Reds game. Oh, and he also had to put up with Mario Balotelli for a year. He spent 18 months at Galaxy, linking up again with Robbie Keane, and once they were knocked out of the MLS Cup playoffs by Seattle Sounders, he announced that he'd retire in 2016, finding the long journeys difficult. His final game for the club was an MLS Cup playoff penalty shootout to Colorado Rapids. Seb Hines. Seb Hines is a 30-year-old defender who stuck onto the pitch for a couple of top-flight games for Middlesbrough about a decade or so ago. The man has spent most of his career in the Championship, but in 2015 he signed with Orlando City for a couple of years. Did it go well? Well, he was dropped into their B team before they declined to offer him a new contract. So what do you think? Darren Hooker. A veteran of the English game at this stage, Darren Hooker crawled over the MLS in 2008 to see what all the fuss was about following Beckham's arrival. The former Newcastle Norwich City winger clearly lost his legs, but at the age of 33 he still managed 9 goals in 29 games, earning the MLS Newcomer of the Year award for San Jose Earthquakes before retiring in 2009. Zat Knight. Zat Knight is another player who had his own fans tearing their hair out in frustration at his complete ineptitude. The former Aston Villa and Bolton centre-half was a complete waste of Premier League time. The fact that Fulham once paid 30 tracksuits for this man is a reflection of his worth, and ended up at Colorado Rapids in 2014, played 4 times as they finished outside the playoffs, before having his contract terminated 3 months later. Frank Lampard. Frank Lampard was one of the greatest players to ever touch a football in America, and yet half his fans hated him from the word go. It was probably due to the fact that it took him ages to actually play for the team. It had been announced he signed for them in January 2015, so instead of sitting around watching Jeremy Kyle every morning with his hand firmly wedged down his pants, he decided to keep busy at parent club Man City 6 months earlier, and then he got carried away and stayed until the end of the season, missing 6 months of the MLS campaign. Considering thousands of jerseys with Lampard's name would have been flogged in the US, you can see why they'd have wanted to burn his house to the ground. When Manuel Pellegrini started hinting that Lampard could stick around for a second season at the Etihad, the Americans had already made up their mind that Fat Frank was worse than Hitler. When he eventually turned up, he was booed to the heavens. It didn't help that his first game was a 7-0 derby loss to New York City FC, but considering the man started his career with his own fans wishing that he'd break his leg, this was nothing, and he battled back, scoring 15 goals in 31 games before hanging up the boots in 2016. Michael Mancien. From Frank Lampard to Michael Mancien. This just sums up the standard of the MLS. While Lampard is Chelsea's all-time record goal scorer, Mancien is the proud owner of 4 top-flight appearances for the club, and has spent most of his career either in Germany or the Championship. Well, the defender has just pitched up a New England revolution under the guidance of Brad Friedel. I mean, it's too early to tell. Tyrone Mears. Tyrone Mears is a strange fish. He was part of the worst Premier League side of all time, and was then rewarded with a loan move to Marseille. Then Then again, that club always seemed to try and look for the most obscure and random Premier League players on the market. The former Derby County, Burnley and current West Brom right back spent 3 years in the US, performing pretty well for Seattle Sounders, Atlanta United and then Minnesota United, winning one MLS Cup along the way. Luke Moore. Luke Moore's footballing legacy will always be that fellow who scored the goal that made about 1,000 Man City fans prematurely cry in the 11-12 title run-in. Moore is still only 32. It feels like he's been around forever, having broke through Aston Villa when he was about 12. He hasn't had a club in 2 years since leaving Toronto, where he scored 7 goals in 42 games. For a man with Premier League hat-tricks to his name, that is terrible. Jordan Much. Jordan Much is where he belongs, as far away from the Premier League as possible. A stain in both Cardiff City and then Crystal Palace, the bang-average midfielder signed for Vancouver Whitecaps on loan in March 2018. What he's done alright, or at least a damn sight better than his embarrassing Premier League offerings. Nedim Onuoha. Nedim Onuoha has finally left QPR after 6 years, and at the age of 31, the former Man City prodigy has just signed for Real Salt Lake. It's too early to tell how he's getting on, but it's crazy. When he made his Premier League debut, this club didn't even exist. Bradley Orr. Okay, so how many of you remember Bradley Orr? It's telling how many players in this list are from QPR. It's almost like players who signed for QPR 5 years ago were motivated by money. Madness. The former Newcastle defender made 6 Premier League appearances for the Hoops, was terrible, and finished up his career 4 years ago on loan at Toronto FC, where he was again pretty bad. Fun fact, he's the uncle of John Flanagan. I wonder if this fella goes around using his girlfriend as a makeshift volleyball. Nigel Reo-Coker. Nigel Reo-Coker's career just makes me sad. This was a man who was on the verge of captaining his side to an FA Cup and representing his country at a World Cup. Instead, Stevie G happened. It's 12 years later and he's just after spending the last half decade jumping from one MLS side to the other. He's still only 34. Rowan Ricketts. Remember Sol Campbell's ultimate act of betrayal when he left Spurs for Arsenal in 2001? Did Tottenham think they were getting their revenge a year later by ensnaring Rowan Ricketts? Because lads, I don't think anyone at Highbury cared. The former England under-20 international is still playing at the age of 35 with the 19th club of his career. In that vast CV, which includes spells in Ecuador, Hong Kong, Thailand, Bangladesh, Moldova, Hungary and Dublin, you swear he was a budding travel agent, was a season at Toronto 10 years ago under the tutelage of the best manager the Premier League has ever seen, Liam Ridgewell. Liam Ridgewell, the fellow uses £50 notes as toilet paper. The former Aston Villa defender signed for Portland Timbers in 2014. He's made nearly 100 appearances for the club and has done pretty well for himself, winning the 2015 MLS Cup and Western Conference playoffs. Oh, and he was also a 2014 MLS All-Star. Liam Ridgewell was an All-Star. Good God. Wayne Rooney. Is it any surprise that Wayne Rooney is tearing it up in America right now? Because it shouldn't be. He's only 33 years old. He was still scoring double digits in the Premier League last season and was winning trophies and representing his country less than 2 years ago. He's already bagged 10 in 18 games for DC United. I mean, it's just too easy for him. He can still do it in European football. I don't know what he's doing over there. Jay Simpson. A striker who never cut it in the Premier League. 13 games and 1 goal for West Brom. But over in America, he is still terrible. 2 goals in 27 games for Philadelphia Union. There is no hope for this 29-year-old, and to think he came through with Arsenal. Sean Wright-Phillips. Sean Wright-Phillips has been absolutely terrible since arriving in America. This was a man who was once a shining light in English football. He got Chelsea over 20 million. He has nearly 40 England caps, and then he wound up at QPR. And surprise, surprise, lads, it didn't do much there apart from fill his pockets every week. He must have thought linking up with his brother at New York Red Bulls in 2015 would do wonders. It didn't at all. He looked just as unfit there and in 2017 was flogged to Phoenix Rising. Bradley Wright-Phillips. At the moment, Bradley Wright-Phillips is a much better player than Sean, which is weird to say considering growing up, Sean was the star at Man City, while Brad was the ungainly centre forward who was pretty much tossed in the cupboard. But in America, the 33-year-old without a single cap to his name is an MLS legend. He's a 2-time MLS Golden Boot winner and currently holds the New York Red Bulls record for most goals scored with 124, which is double the number of the man in second, a certain Juan Pablo Angel. I'm not sure how or why, but over in America, Bradley Wright-Phillips is a superstar.